All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, baseball community. Great to be here with you this week. Our weekly get-together, efficiently going from new coaches to good coaches and from good coaches to great coaches. Coach Bo here with you. Pumped up to be here and also pumped up watching the Little League World Series. Always a fun watch. And speaking of Little League, we have an interview today with a longtime friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Lamarr Biffle. Coach Biffle, Lamarr's dad, had a big presence as a Little League coach in the Compton area of Los Angeles. Lamarr will talk about that experience, and he's going to share with us some really good information, great insight into what he looks for in a coach. Lamarr is an athletic director now, so he hires and sometimes has to fire coaches as part of his day job. And he also has coached all the various sports, including baseball. He'll talk about recently stepping in and coaching a badminton team because there were no coaches for it. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive right into the interview. All right, I'm here with a good friend of mine, Lamarr Biffle, Coach Biffle. Lamarr, how you doing today?
Good, and you?
Doing good. Hey, thanks for coming on. Tell us, Lamarr, tell the listeners, I know a lot about your story. I'm always excited to hear more from you. Every time we talk, I learn more, and I'm just pumped up to have you on. And maybe you could tell the listeners of the podcast, tell them about your journey and what's led you to where you're at now as a coach and that role as an athletic director.
I would say going back to as a kid, I started playing Little League Baseball at 4 years old. At that time, it was not T-ball. And my dad was the coach. And my dad was very impressionable to the community and was a role model to many. And I started playing baseball. And as a kid, I thought I was going to be a pro baseball player one day. I idolized a lot of baseball players, but point is, I really got into sports. And from that point on, I've always loved sports. I was always passionate about sports. And that goes all the way back to 4. Every year from there, playing baseball and then playing other stuff, football. First of all, I grew up in Compton. There was a lot of baseball back in Compton at that time. And there were a lot of baseball players. Even when I was young, I didn't even know. And I learned later a lot of baseball players who come out of Compton played in the major leagues that come out of there. My uncle, he was a pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates, which he's a retired chief of police at LAPD today. He used to be our pitching coach. We had other family members that coached. My dad had family that coached us. He put us in different travel ball leagues, and that started me playing sports and being involved. Moving forward, played through high school. You get to high school, I focused on football over baseball, which I regret today that I didn't stick with baseball. That things happen, and you start to learn in high school whether or not you're going to be this something you're going to continue to do or not. You go to college and on and on. So I worked jobs and always stayed involved. My dad was a coach, and he got involved coaching basketball. He got coaching other kids, and I just watched with my dad and helped coach with him. He taught Ed O'Bannon how to play basketball back when he was in the 5th grade. And there were others like the Tyus Edneys, and there were just a ton of group of guys they were from Carson in the Carson Victoria Park Traveling League. So then my father passed away at the age of 40 of a massive heart attack. We had a particular traveling team with Tyus Edney, Johnny McWilliams, and Cherokee Parks, and Damian Stoudermeyer. A nice group of kids. We played all the way through until they graduated from high school. For the most part, everybody on the team got scholarships. They all graduated from college for the most part, and they're all been productive for the most part. Then later on, I helped coach at Artesia. That was during the transition after my father passed away too. And Ed O'Bannon with Artesia, Charles O'Bannon, Avondre Jones, which probably was one of the most talented kids I ever seen. He was almost 7 feet tall, but he never rose to his potential. He had too many outside distractions. But then I took a break. I spent time with Arn Tellem, the baseball agent. I wanted to be a baseball sports agent at one time. And then I decided, I'm like, man, that's some pretty heavy stuff being an agent. So I went to school to be a physical therapist. But during the time of doing the grad checks, and they say, what do you want to do? You want to continue to do that or education? I went into education, and here's where I'm at. I went from education back and just sticking with teaching. And then I got involved in coaching. And then years later, there was a principal, Mario Jimenez. He chose me to be athletic director. And here we are 15, 18 years later. I've been an athletic director. And this is kind of like, my journey to being where I'm at.
You have a lot of experience for a lot of years in the sports world, a lot of different sports, and we'll get into that a little bit more here. And you've gone in and coached some badminton, some other sports that are super non-traditional sports, although we're seeing them right now with the Olympics being on. But you have such a background in sports, and your father coached. And I think it's interesting when kids grow up with when their father coaches. I think that gives them a different perspective on coaching and a head start on what to do and what not to do and things like that. But you've been around a lot of coaches. You hire coaches, probably sometimes have to fire some coaches. Your day job is evaluating coaches and their programs. What are the common traits you've observed among the most successful coaches that you've been around?
I think that successful coach, I don't measure by championships, but I measure by, first of all, do they have passion for the game, the craft that they coach? No matter what sport it is, if they're passionate about it, I know that they're going to be good with it because I know that they're going to care enough to teach their kids the right things. The other thing is when I hear coach talk about, I want my kids to learn fundamentals and I want my kids to, along with fundamentals, I want them to have fun when they play because they got to be in a good place when they play. I would say those are some of the really good characteristics. They have organized practice schedules and they have meetings with their kids and they do little celebrations. They turn their team into a culture. They treat them like a family. That's what I see in a good coach. When a coach just show up to practice for, number one, if they show up and they do a 2-hour practice and there's no extras, there's no bonding. In your team, you got to build your team and have some bonding. When you have a coach that's over disciplined, screaming, hollering, and cussing, you're not going to get much from your kids. Those days are gone. If like when you get kids that you got so many kids come from so many different backgrounds, you got to try to tap into many of those backgrounds as possible. And when I see a coach, I'll use for an example, I have a girls basketball coach, just got done talking to Coach Wesley Rosenbaum. And he came into a program and I swear our girls, they were like the bad news bears in the league. And now they're like, they almost tied for second in league just this year. And he just did 3 years. But this guy is passionate. He runs a very structure. He treats them like a family. He does things with them. He does all of the elements with them. He's that. My new football coach, same thing. He's developed that kind of culture. So that's what I look for in the traits of a coach.
Your answer makes me think back to, you mentioned Mario Jimenez, who was the principal at the school that hired you and saw your ability to be a really great athletic director. And I think Mario, backstory on that, Mario gave me my first shot almost 20 years ago as a teacher, and he believed in me. He stood up for me and he fought to get me in because I think he knew that I could connect and build rapport and connect with kids of all different backgrounds and just really connect with kids. And I think the same thing when he hired you to be an athletic director, I think he saw the same thing. Maybe I should get Mario on here sometime. And I know he coached back in the day.
He would love it.
He's a great guy. And I'll tell you what, that's interesting that he saw that in both of us, different roles. But those things that you see when you're looking at a coach, say they're coming in and say you're interviewing a coach, do you see some of those traits? Can you see those just by what they're saying, or do you get a feel for that?
Sometimes when you interview coaches, like I know everybody can fudge an interview. So sometimes you can't really read past. Some people are good interviewers and they just know how to interview. They know how to talk the good game, but that don't mean they'll stick to what they're supposed to stick to. I remember when we interviewed Wes, I felt really something special about this guy. We had an interview panel, and when we let the other guy go, the other guy was a super nice guy, but man, he had no idea. There were certain things he just had no idea. But anyway, you could just tell, you could tell this guy is something special. To be honest with you, he's in it. He's from, I want to say Wes is a Bay Area, New York guy, and he's a full-time teacher, and he'll be there for a while. you could tell he was very stable. You could tell he wasn't all over the place. You could tell when they start talking all over the place and they start guaranteeing that these kids, I'm going to get them in college and this and that. That's what really turned me off, because you don't know who's going to be the one to do that. You can't guarantee.
That's a good message for youth baseball or youth coaches of any youth sport to not overpromise. You don't like to see it as an athletic director. You don't want to get overpromised and all this hype, and that's a red flag. And I think we've talked about that a little bit on this podcast about not overselling or not overpromising kids, whether it could be as simple as playing time, but also championships. And I think that's a good message. You want to come across confident, but you don't want to come across promising too much.
Yeah. On the other hand, I'll say this. I have a football coach, and this guy, he's amazing. He have a lot of connections. And when he say that he can get your kid into college, he pretty much can get them in. Now, they might not be at a Pac-12 school or a Big Ten school, but the first year he coached, he got 3 kids into Lincoln University. And those kids, they would have been junior college or less. Their grades they weren't on NC2A track. They weren't, but he got them into Lincoln. Just recently, he got some kids into Graceland. And now his son just committed to Hawaii. We got another kid who's getting courted by Ivy League schools. He's got some kids coming out. He's going to probably have about 8 kids get scholarships this year. And even on that, the one kid, one of the receivers that went to Graceland, because of his connections, USC offered this kid to be a walk-on at SC. SC was like, they said you could be this walk-on, and his father, and they were just like ready to make it happen. But his name is Jake Bautista. He was like, no, I think I'm going to stick with Graceland. He felt it was too much pressure. But I will say, when it comes to these colleges, he definitely know how to open the door to get him in.
Yeah, Coach Nielsen, who's over there coaching at your school, is confident and has shown success. And speaking of which, I know his son's a pretty highly regarded baseball player and could be drafted very high this year. So fun athlete to watch. A real good baseball player, one of the better athletes that come out of Jordan High School in a long time, winning like league championships or winning a state championship or CIF championship, which they have in California. But more than that, like for youth coaches, beyond just winning games, how would you measure a coach's success beyond just winning percentage?
The type of kids, whether it's boys or girls, the type of kids on the back end, are they responsible? Are they taking care of business in the classroom? Can they go out in the public and survive? And I would say one of the nicest things when you have kids come back to you after they graduate and they can kind of like, hey, Mr. Biffle, your program impacted me because it was so structured. I had to do these things. And now that I had to go to college and I'm a grown man or woman, because of the time that you put into me, it made me transfer those skills to being a good human being. To me, that's bigger than a championship. Everybody wants to win championships, but if you really think about it, the hype on a championship lasts about 2 weeks. You get the initial, if it's the NBA championship, they get their parade in, once parade. Who cares after that? It's a wrap. It's a done deal. I mean, that's the NBA. It doesn't last long. But overall, did you create an environment to help make these student athletes better people? And you'll know when they come back. There's some very successful championship coaches who don't have that kind of relationship with their kids. There are some. They won a bunch of championships, but they just don't have that kind of relationship. So I think the relationships are more important than the championship.
And they might have been able to win more championships, those coaches that did have some success with putting up championship banners, but they didn't build their players into better human beings. And I think what you said there is so interesting, and just a key message that I think the listeners need to take out of that right there is the winning and losing is temporary. You've been a mentor of mine for a lot of years, Lamarr, and one thing that everybody has their strengths, and I guess you have a lot of strengths, but some that have really stood out. One of them was you really see things from that 30,000 foot view, that you kind of see everything. You're very even keel. I could give example after example of how this is how what you've said and helped me over the years. And it's interesting that we as coaches, even somebody like myself who's been doing it for over 2 decades now as a coach, still has to back up and say, hey, this winning this and losing this, winning this game, losing this or winning this championship, this is going to be temporary. It's going to be forgotten in a couple of weeks. Who won the Super Bowl 3 years ago? I could ask a bunch of, NFL fans that. I bet more than half of them wouldn't even remember. And so that's the Super Bowl. It's the most watched game in the world. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And I've had that conversation with other coaches before on the youth baseball field. And I've said to them, they'll get upset. They're yelling at the ump. And I'll go over to them and I'll say, hey, this is a Wednesday night, 11-year-old baseball game on a backfield. So I think that's a really good message. And the type of people, like you're saying, that these kids are going to become is lifelong. The type of people you're going to raise them into or grow or build them into is going to be a lifelong thing. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. I had a young lady on my badminton team, and one of my sports that I picked up, and I'll never forget, she was very loyal. She was a good player, but our school versus some other schools, we're still building. But nevertheless, I had a guy coaching with me, and he was old school. He didn't cuss the kids out, but he was old school. But she didn't like it. And me and her talked. I told her, just stick with it. We're going to be fine. So one day I keep up with her. She's a college student now. She's going to be a junior, I think, this year at UC San Diego. And she texted me and she explained to me in a long text how all of the practices and the experiences and and this is where you go to winning and losing. Sometimes you can win, but you lose. And sometimes you lose, you can win because you got to learn how to take both. And we have to learn that in life. But she basically let me know how much she appreciated the fact that I taught her how to stick with things, because when times is rough at college, she think about our past with the badminton. And basically that's what she told me.
When I talked to you years ago, you said, hey, Bo, I'm coaching badminton, but that's the kind of person you are, that the team needed it. You were the athletic director, but that team needed a coach and you stepped in. And that's pretty awesome. So back to hiring a coach. And so for the youth coaches, particularly youth baseball coaches that are listening to this, what are the main qualities or characteristics you prioritize when hiring?
First of all, the other part, you want to try to give the kids some exposure. If you're able to take them to a college baseball game, or of course, you want to do that. Like I think I mentioned, in building a culture with them, being organized and teaching them fundamentals. Fundamentals is huge. I think back when they were teaching me baseball as a little boy, teaching us how to field the ball. And we used to have little games, pickle and over the line. But I just remember we used to have this drill where you roll the ball, the person had to learn how to scoop it and throw it back. My dad used to make us get on one knee when we warm up our throws, and you have to use just the arm only with no foot action. Then you get up and you start to step and throw. Literally, they broke everything down. Just like we used to have the baseballs, and you'd have a bucket and you would teach them how to make a good cut. So you pop that ball up and they swing, bam, pop it, swing, because you want to get them to get used to the swing timing. Like sometimes they do wiffle balls with this. Of course, you got to teach them the knowledge of making decisions. That takes some time, teaching them how to make good decisions. You got a man on second and third. Who are you going to hold? Who are you going to go for? Those things going to be a little bit more complicated, but teaching them how to swing, teaching them how to throw the ball, how to throw the ball, teaching them to the best you can where they're not afraid of the ball when the ball is coming. Those are some of the major things. I learned the good old hard way with my dad. He had a big bucket of balls, and that ball used to come sizzling, hit me in the chest, and he'd just say, get back down there, son. It's coming again. I had to fight that ball, and I had to learn how to fight it. He made me not be afraid of baseballs. So I wasn't afraid to hit. I wasn't afraid of speed. I wasn't afraid of feeling the ball. Yeah, a lot of time I'll watch coaches coach a baseball team, and they just hit ground balls and hit fly balls. You got to break them up. If I'm going to take some outfielders, I'm going to hit that ball out there. They got to learn how to throw to the cutoff man. They got to learn how to get it to the cutoff man and relay it. Either that with the infield, you got to learn how to field the ball. So I might want to take one or two people in small groups and really learn on fielding the ball. And I want many times, not even just throwing it, field it, boom, boom, just 100. You got to have lots of balls to work on those areas. But sometimes when you have a practice and you put 9 people in the field and you just do the basic stuff, they're not going to get any better like that. You got to do all of those extra elements to make them better.
Yeah, breaking teams up into stations or into different groups. And what I just got out of that was a couple of things that really stood out. You said you got to have a lot of baseballs. That's the first step and the main step to getting more quality reps. You want to be fielding ground balls, catching fly balls, making throws. You don't want to spend more than 2% of your practice picking up baseballs and having to bring the bucket over and all that. So that's a huge one right there. And then I love how you said your dad challenged you out there. Either practice is easy and the game is going to be hard, or practice is hard and the game's going to be easier. It's got to be one or the other. Like you got to have some challenge. And I think that's great advice right there. And okay, so what are some things coaches can do to create a healthy relationship with their players' parents? You've been around a lot of parents, players' parents. What are some things that you've seen good coaches do to create a healthy relationship with their players' parents, since the parents are a big part of the culture?
It varies from area to area, depending on the demographics. There are some very supportive parents. And if you're in a low socio demographic area, you might have some challenges where the parents are getting involved, but you got to try to open up and have some communication with them. Even if they can't meet with you, try to have communication with them and keep them. You have to constantly, hey, let me know when you're able to come to a game to see your son play or your daughter play. You definitely want to have parent meetings. You definitely want to communicate. I think the more you communicate to them, the better. Here's our weekly practice schedule. Here's our weekly game schedule. Here's maybe once in a while, hey, we're going to have a meeting and you bring up some refreshments and talk about all of the positive things and see if they could have a fun night with the kids. Hey, let's have a pizza night with the kids, or let's go do a whatever kind of night where the parents can communicate and talk to each other. And there are always, no matter what, can't avoid this, but there are always going to be some challenges because you always going to have that one parent that feel like, my kid is better than yours, or you're always going to have some differences you're going to have to face to deal with. So you just have to be prepared for that. They ain't going to be perfect. But I think the more communication and the more included that a parent feels, it can help go a long ways and give them some positive but honest. If their kid is struggling in skills, you let them know. Say, hey, your kid have a lot of potential, but they struggle in skills. Maybe on your free time, play catch with your son or do some things. And I think if always be honest with them. You can't just tell them straight out that they suck or anything, but you can. I feel like every person have potential. Everybody grows it different. You never know. They could be a late bloomer and all of a sudden be a super good player down the road. So you always want to leave the door open for that. So those are some of the things that I suggest.
What a great suggestion there. The coach is providing parents with specific recommendations for things that they can go do with the kid. It got me thinking there about how that can be incorporated. And some coaches will be better at this because they have more experience in their sport and they can share and provide. It could just be a simple drill. If you got a basketball player and they're real good on the boards and they're good around the hoop, but they don't have good handles. They can't dribble very well. Maybe that could be something you could just give the parent. You could send them a YouTube video of a good drill you found, or better yet, get one of your own and show it to them after practice. Hey, this would be a good idea to do 30 minutes a week outside of practice. I like that idea of sharing with the players' parents some extra work that they could be doing that's fit to their needs and can help out. That's awesome. Speaking of parents, say you get a parent that's a pain in the neck, right? They're loud at the games or they're second guessing. Have you had any of those instances come up where coaches have come to you and say, hey, I got this parent that's acting a fool. They're yelling they're questioning me. They're yelling at me. Have you had any of those in your experience as an athletic director? And if so, what would be like a way to handle that situation?
We've had that. We typically, if I have a parent that get a little out of hand and I'll tell the parent that I would like to have a meeting with them, and we have a code of conduct, and I'll let them know. I'll say, hey, we have a code of conduct at our school and school events. And if you can't meet the code of conduct, we have to run a safe environment, and when things are out of control, and if it's out of control and I can't keep you under control, we might not be able to invite you to the next game. But you got to follow the code of conduct. We can't run a loose situation, and we have too many people in here. We have to look at everybody. It's a safety issue. It's a total safety issue.
You mentioned at the beginning, your answer at the beginning of your answer to that last question was you have to proactively communicate. And I just don't think you can communicate too often. I think coaches can get a little long-winded with their individual message or their individual email or an individual phone call. I think it's important not to get too long-winded at any one time, but I don't think it's a bad idea to have frequent communication with the team's parents and keep them in the know. I do recommend coaches not get long-winded. I caution them so they don't get long-winded. If I'm a parent and I'm getting an email every week and it's 2 pages long, I got my day job. I might be working a second job. I got other kids. I got my own personal stuff they're taking care of. I got grocery shopping, all these things you got to do, things around the house. You're not going to have time to read an essay every week, but I like the recommendation of communicating. And so I think youth coaches specifically could say, okay, what is a way I can communicate? Maybe a group text message or a group email. How can I communicate just something quick that I could share with them that they could read in a few minutes once a week and really get an idea where I'm coming from as a coach, what the plan is, some of the reminders of the code of conduct, like you said. And also then if there's specific issues that come up, you could have those touch base meetings and go from there. Speaking of coaches now, what are the most frequent or significant errors you see a good chunk of coaches making? And I like to stick to that 80-20 principle kind of paradigm where we're looking like, what are the 20% of mistakes coaches make that bring about 80% of the headache or 80% of the turmoil with the team and the team culture that you've seen?
I want to go back to something real quick we mentioned about with the coaches and having connection with parents. I remember when my father coached when I was younger, and that was a thing that he did. He always met with the parents, and he said, regardless of what, you still is not going to be perfect, but he met with the parents and he let them know this is my expectations. When you talk about making errors, I think one of the biggest things is the lack of organization. I think that a coach should have practice plans. If practice started at 3:00, from 3 to 3:15, we're going to stretch. From 3:15 to 3:30, we're going to pair up and warm up with the baseball. We're going to have a routine every day, and practice should be no more than about 2 hours because a kid attention span only can go for so long. You could go 5 hours if you want to, but you're not going to get nothing out of them. They become very numb at that time. So too long of a practice, it is a problem. Having a regular routine and organization is the side that can take you a long ways. Making sure that you take some of your players of strength you think is your strength players versus players that are not. Try to diversify them to see if you could bring those players up to level. Sometime more often, some coaches really focus on their strength players, but you're not building up the other team. But you get so caught up on, if I got 6 players and I think they're just the best, but then I got 3, I focus on these 6, and you got to focus on the whole team. And I see that mistake being made a lot. But I would say really organization and routine is like a lesson plan. You will go a long ways with that. If you have a routine with a set schedule, yeah, you're going to deviate every now and then and things are going to go a little different. But if on a regular, it makes practice smooth. The kids have an understanding. And most of all, they're having fun and they're learning.
Organization. I know we've had this talk over the years, and you've mentioned you got to have a plan when you roll out there and be willing to deviate, like you said. But all the great coaches have a practice plan and they stick fairly close to it, with some exceptions, of course, and pivoting when they need to. But yeah, you got to have a plan when you go out there. And I think that, if anything, just makes you feel more comfortable, or more confident when you walk out there. Just having that extra confidence sometimes can be the players, they can sniff it out if a coach is confident or if a coach is winging it. If a coach has a plan, right? If a coach has a plan, they just come across to the players as more competent, right?
They definitely can sniff out when a coach is not, and they'll tell you. There are kids that say it. Oh, this coach don't know what he's doing. They'll say it.
Yeah, it's amazing how much kids can tell. They can smell it, they can sniff it out, how much more than maybe we want to give them credit for, or how much maybe the average adult gives the average kid credit for. They can sniff out a coach that's not prepared. Coaches need to walk out there with confidence. And I think just walking out there with confidence, and it really starts with being prepared and having a plan. Okay, you mentioned something that was interesting about coaching of all the players. So the next kind of question I had queued up here was, what do good coaches do to ensure that all players feel included and excited to play? Is there anything you want to add to the kind of the basic premise, that the key thing that you mentioned just a minute ago about you got to incorporate all the kids and coach up all the kids? You can't just coach up your star players. You got to coach them all up. Is there another strategy or strategies that good coaches you've seen them do or yourself to ensure that all players feel included or excited to play?
I think those are some of the key elements. Like anything, some coaches have some really good, and it depends. Some of them they have a way about themselves and they know how to get that kid going. They have that personality. They have a way about themselves. I know me as an educator, as a coach, and I learned from being involved in my past in so many different things. And I remember being really involved in basketball, and I used to hear some of the great coaches. They never call themselves coaches. They said, I'm an educator. And when you think of that, I think of also my personality with the kids. And I think about all of the people I deal with. I have a sarcasm that the kids like. I'm serious, but approachable. You want to be approachable. You have some coaches, they feel like if I scare them away, I'm going to make them tough, but you have to be approachable. And that's key. If you get your kids and they feel like that you're not approachable, not a good thing. You got to be approachable.
We want our players to respect us, not be scared of us. And those are two different things.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
We want our kids to, here's a good indicator. If our kids walk up and start telling us what to do, or just blatantly disrespect us or tell us off in front of the team, that's not where we want to be, of course. But we shouldn't have the kid who's afraid to come up and share with us. We should feel approachable, with the caveat that it shouldn't be like the kid walking up and expects you to do the cool high five handshakes he does with his teammates, like he's your best friend. This is something I use with players. I've used for years. I've used with students for years. I say, hey, first day, I say, hey, I'm not here to be your friend. Hey, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to lead you. I'm here to be your teacher. I'm here to guide you. And I'm here to be hopefully a mentor and an adult that you look up to and respect. I really think the kids appreciated that because, one, they don't want to be our friends. They don't want adults as friends. They really don't. They want other kids to be their friends. I think they also don't like it when the coach is trying to be the best friend, like you trying to be cool at their level. That's always a big red flag to the kids, I think, right? They want you to lead them. They need us to lead them. Would you agree with what I'm saying there, or do you want to add to that?
Oh, yeah. Kids are resilient, and you definitely want to, you have to draw a line, and you have to let them know everybody have their boundaries. And when you set the boundaries, you have to stick with it. Just like us as the coaches, the adults, we have to stick to our boundaries. We can't let our guards down. On the other hand, we still have to be approachable, professional. And if it's something that there's a way of handling it, because if you get a kid, they have a meltdown, there's a way to handle that meltdown. Handling it you can't go meltdown with them. You have to pull them aside and have a conversation with them. And in some cases, sometimes you say, hey, you know what? Why don't you take the rest of the day off and have a fresh start tomorrow? There are different ways of handling it. But when some adults get caught up and they feel like this kid is having a meltdown and I got to show them that I'm the bigger person, you can't stoop to their level. That's what you can't do.
You don't want to join their temper tantrum or their outburst. Take a deep breath. And what I'll do is I'll take a deep breath and I don't come right at them. And I learned that if you come right at them, then you're just kind of butting heads and nobody wins. You have to flank them. There's a well-known Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink, got a really popular podcast. He talks constantly about flanking, and not just flanking the enemy in the battlefield, but just teammates. Like you just go head up on somebody that's not going to work. And you got to come around the side. But one thing I think that really stood out about the players that you really want to just build that rapport with them and connect with them, and without trying to act like you're their friend. So moving to the next question here, how would you describe your coaching style? I know you've coached a lot of sports. I know you've coached baseball. You did the badminton, football, basketball. And how would you describe your coaching style?
Routine. I like to start off with a conversation, letting them know what the goal is for practice. What are we going to cover? What are we going to work on? These are our strengths. These are our weaknesses. Let's see if we could work on both. Want to have a routine, and you want to keep it within a certain amount of time within there, because the attention span only can go so long. So that would be depending on what sport it is, what skill we work on, or what have you, that's within that time frame. That's something that I would stick with. Although I learned a lot from my father, I got that piece from my high school football coach, Lalo Mendoza. He had a practice schedule every day, and we stuck to it. He stuck to that time. He stuck to that. And I just think that's effective. So that would be my coaching style.
That's cool. I was thinking about what you said earlier about rules and being upfront with the kids, and this ties in back to a couple questions ago, and it just hit me. You talked about rules. You have to follow through with your rules. And I was coaching alongside somebody that we knew, and I just remember the first practice, a lot of rules came out. First month, a lot of rules were being talked about, but nothing was ever enforced. And rules are not what's on paper, and rules are not what we tell the kids. Rules are not the rules that we tell the players. They're not the rules we go over at the beginning of the season. They're not the rules that we outline on some piece of paper. Those are not the rules. Those are not the rules. Even though we say, hey, these are my 5 rules, those are not the rules. The rules, or the expectations, and some people like to call rules, the rules or the expectations are simply what gets enforced and where the follow through is. What are some things that coaches could do, listeners of this podcast could do? What are some strategies to build a positive team culture? Do you have any examples of something you would do with your players you've done in the past, kind of maintain that positive team culture or kind of build that positive team culture?
I would have, first and foremost, you got to build your team as more than a team. You got to treat them like a family. And you have number one, you have parent meetings, which involve just parents. You have meetings with parents and student athletes, and have little functions, whether it's pizza party or ice cream or donut or something, where you include everybody, and you want to have time. You take that time to talk about what's happening, where you're going, what you're doing, what do we need to improve on, and those kind of things. You can build culture, and you want to try to have things that make them feel like at home, make them feel like you want them to be inspired to keep coming back. For instance, if you were someone who've never taken the time to do that, you're in jeopardy of it. It's just a group of guys. They show up and nobody cares. You don't talk to the parents. You don't have, on the flip side, that's what you're likely to get. But when you start to do extra outside of that practice realm, you really start to build the structure. You really start to build you want to build some type of rapport, good relationship to bond, pull everything together. And that can play a big, nice part on your team.
An example I would share that I learned from you is you never put kids on blast in front of their buddies, their teammates, their homies. You never really blasted them. And I thought that was interesting because we worked alongside some other teachers who would just put kids on blast. And when I'm working with fellow educators and coaches, I always say, hey, you don't want to put kids on blast individually. If at all possible, avoid that. You can blast the team as a whole. That's fine. But just something that I think that I learned early from you was you never put them on blast. You'd have those side conversations. And I think it goes into building the rapport and team culture, right? It's not always about having pizza parties and outings, but also about just how our interactions. If they respect you, word of mouth, this is something that makes me think of word of mouth is like the best way of marketing, right? Word of mouth marketing is probably the best, right? You can put an advertisement on TV or this, that, and the other. You can do email marketing, but really at the end of the day, what holds the most value and weight? Word of mouth recommendations are like the most powerful. And so if you can build connections with kids, especially kids that might have a lot of pull with the other players. Okay, so you talked about our players come from different backgrounds, different experiences, different households, different. One might come from a house, the thing is, the family's a struggle, or they come from, they have less money or more money, or they have different issues going on. Each of our players is going to come from some different backgrounds. How crucial is that for us to consider when it comes to having a deeper understanding of our players? Is that something that's really important or just somewhat important? What would you say?
I think it's very important. It plays a part in how would you operate with your player. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be soft, but you do have to have compassion. Like a kid is in a certain circumstance or what have, you'll know exactly how to operate with that person. How, if you try to figure out how you're going to push that person, or how far can you push him depending on those circumstances. So yes, that plays a big part, and you do have to have some compassion. So knowing that background is very important.
When I hear you say knowing where the kid's coming from allows us to understand and gauge how much we can push, or like I mentioned just a minute ago about putting the kids on blast, I would consider it very lucky for you to have 2 of those players out of the 12 where you can just put them on blast and it's not going to affect the way they respect you and how they respond to it. And they can just handle it because they come from, maybe they have a father like that or parents like that, or they're just used to that. They're okay with taking the criticism and they're confident in themselves. That's definitely something to be careful with. Understanding their backgrounds and where they're coming from, you saying is crucial. It's important to tailor our coaching a little bit within some parameters for the different situations the kids are coming from or their past experiences.
Yeah, most definitely. You definitely want to do that. You want to tailor, depending on who they are, what they do, you definitely want to tailor that situation, no doubt.
Coaches often will talk about how to individualize the coaching instruction when it comes to the physical stuff. But I think it's way more important to individualize how we approach each player based off of maybe their family situation or their past experiences or lack of experience with baseball or other sports. So what's an innovative approach or some innovative approaches that baseball coaches can use to spark greater interest and engagement among today's youth?
I think that maybe to some degree, if they could have some times where they could give their kids some exposure to upper class baseball, whether they're at home looking at TV together as a team, to see how those teams try to model behind that can innovate kids. But you want to have the whole team together so you can point things out to them, or as many as possible. So that totally would be something really good to do. Of course, keeping up with your normal routine and practices and what have you. But then, like I said, once again, keep in mind, kids are different than in the past. It's a different kind of kid. So you definitely got to be compassionate to different things and their exposures and who they are and that kind of stuff. And I think the more aspects you add to your team members, not just baseball aspects, but other things like I say, team meetings and team gatherings and all of the things you put together, I just see where a kid is going to want to be motivated to come back. And the more you get kids wanting to come back, the more you're going to get them to learn and the more they're going to be interested in coming back. But if you run an environment where it's super over strict and I can't make a mistake and I'm all over your head about it, when I get to that point, then a kid is going to really struggle like, darn, I got to go to practice today. I don't feel like doing it. So you want to have the environment to where they're hearing is inviting to them to come. And the more that happens, the more the kids going to want to come to practice, and the likely of the kids getting better and gelling together as a team is going to happen.
Makes me think of the winning percentage that really matters. The percentage of kids, players that want to come back next season, that want to play next season, that should be your goal. And then also, are they better people at the end of the season? You know, what percentage of your players are better human beings at the end of the season? And how many of them want to come back because you made it fun? And speaking of coaching techniques, is there a particular coaching technique or approach that you found especially effective that you don't think a lot of coaches are using, or you haven't seen a lot of coaches use? Is there like a coaching technique or something you're using, or you've seen some coaches that use, but you're like, man, I wish more coaches would do that?
Each individual coach have different things that they can master, and some might have a different way of mastering the situations. I would just say, I hope that coaches can try to have, as far as they really focusing on baseball, really try to study the game of baseball so that they can give back to the kids what baseball should be. And that includes with good sportsmanship and what have you. Try to have as many modalities to introduce to them, and try to introduce many different aspects of the game so that they can be exposed to get the most that they can possibly get out and learn how to play baseball. So like if I'm a youth coach, coaching 11 and under, so they're getting close to where you get to the 13, 14 U and they go into high school, but they're older. I would, first of all, know the rules of baseball and learn those rules. I would look at some collegiate baseball, some pro baseball, and even get some high school baseball knowledge. Maybe look at a high school practice and see what they have and if there's anything that I could use. I definitely would read up on some stuff, some information. And then when I say lay out different, of course, we got our basic fundamentals, but I would want to try throughout the year for the baseball season, try to touch on as many of those things as possible that I learned from outside. Because I'm thinking in the mindset of somebody who might have been coaching youth baseball, but maybe only did it 2 or 3 years so far. Now, somebody who's been doing it for 15 years, I'm quite sure they have a different grip on how they do it. So if I've been coaching it for 2 or 3 years, I'm still learning how I'm going to pull it together. If I've been doing it for 15 years, how to keep myself from becoming stale. So I still got to learn some things. I should have a common grip on how I'm going to go about working with people. But I can't go stale, because if I do just the same, it can go stale too. So you definitely want to keep your skills upgraded so that you could keep yourself growing as an educator and distributing information.
I like how you mentioned the coaches should know the rules, the rule book. And I like you said, avoid coaches that have been coaching a little bit, avoid getting complacent. Don't let your coaching game get stale. So Lamarr, is there anything you'd like to add? You got a lot of wisdom over a lot of years. Is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
I'll say this in closing. If you're going to be a youth coach, make sure you do it for all the right reasons. Make sure that you have passion to work with kids. We get it. You might not be the most knowledgeable, but have passion for the game, have love for the game, and respect your kids that you're teaching, and respect them because they're going to be adults one day. So if you give them like the 120% that you could possibly give them to be better human beings and better baseball players and teach them the game, one day it's going to be their turn to give that information back to someone else. So that's something I'd like to leave you with.
That positive domino effect. Like you said, you got to do it for the right reasons. I appreciate your time, Lamarr. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, no worries. It was great. So I'm glad we were able to connect today.
Thank you for coming on. Hopefully I can get you up to Idaho soon. But until then, I appreciate you taking the time to be on here and sharing out all your wisdom. All right, that wraps up our interview with Coach Biffle. Hope you all enjoyed it. Definitely think there was some good information, and I think it's always good to get different perspectives on coaching from different angles, and I promise to do my best to keep bringing quality people, quality coaches, quality interviews to this podcast. Speaking of which, I have lined up a quality strength and conditioning coach that works specifically with youth athletes and high school athletes, but a lot of youth athletes, getting them faster, stronger, quicker, more athletic in fun and healthy ways. So I have a commitment from this coach to do an interview, which looks like it's going to be recorded in the next few weeks. And I'm excited to bring that to all of you within the month. Speaking of the next month, here are the main 3 topics, things we're going to cover over the next 3 weeks. Next week, we're going to discuss the catcher's number 1 job, the number 1 job a catcher has. And we'll talk about the other priorities that fall below it. But we're going to highlight the catcher's number 1 job that they need to be good at or great at first and foremost. In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about a coaching mindset that will bring all of us a lot more enjoyment out on the field. And in 3 weeks, we'll talk about a different angle to the 80-20 rule. Having been somebody who is a huge proponent, of course, of the 80-20 principle in all areas of life as a way to prioritize what's important so we can maximize and optimize our results in any area of life, whether that's our family, work, as a coach, our health, exercise, nutrition, things that need to be done around the house. As somebody who's studied the 80-20 principle, the 80-20 rule extensively, I had this thought as I was driving to pick up my kid from school yesterday that I want to share with you. I want to dive into it, unpack it. This is another way to use the 80-20 principle to keep us on the track to more success. And I think you'll find it interesting and very helpful as we fine-tune our paradigm, our mindset, so we can be more successful. All right, everyone. If you haven't already, head over to 8020baseball.com. There's 14 videos over there packed with good information, a dozen articles, the free drill design guide. Quite a few of you have downloaded that recently. So until next week, head over to 80-20 Baseball in the meantime and take care of yourself. Let's take care of our health so we can be there at our best for our families, close friends, and the other areas of life that we're trying to optimize. All right, everyone, take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.